Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly chess interview show where we talk with accomplished chess players, authors, and personalities about their lives, their careers, and how to improve at chess. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters and by Chessable.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. It is good to be back. We missed you last week, and we have an often requested guest joining us this week. As a player, he was the two-time champion of the Hungarian Junior Tournament. These days, he's better known as an IM and a trainer. He captained the 2008 Australian Women's Olympiad team in Dresden. He, as I said, is originally from Hungary, but he's now based in Australia. He is a teacher by training, which is quite evident in his content, which I have been really getting into as I get ready for this interview. He does a bit of Twitch, a lot of YouTube, and has a revered and enjoyable Chessable course called Chess Principles Reloaded. It's talking about his beloved center. So I'm excited to bring him in and hear more about his background and get all of his chess improvement reflections and tips. So let's bring him in. I am Andras Toth. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation, which I, by the way, slightly triggered when I contacted you a fair while ago on Twitter. And I would like to welcome all the listeners. So thank you very much for having on this very prestigious podcast. And actually, I would like to start with a story, Ben. The reason why I'm here, obviously, partly is because you invited me and because of I was hopefully requested, but I also contacted you a while ago and I said I would be very happy to come to the Perpetual Chess podcast. When I sent you that message, I knew very little, both about you and the podcast itself. And in hindsight, it was a little bit of, I don't know if I was quite ready for it. So what happened was that I joined Twitter to sort of popularize my chess activities, many of which you have already kindly introduced, but in particular my Chessable courses. And so I contacted various chess personalities, including you, and I'm like, oh, this guy does a chess podcast. That would be cool to be on. So I'm like, yeah. And I sent you a message. And afterwards, I'm like, let's check out actually this guy and his podcast. I knew nothing, right? And so I'm like, oh, Boris Gelfand. Oh, right. Okay. Then I saw Jacob Agard, who I consider to be one of the best chess authors out there. I'm like, okay, just maybe I should have waited for this guy to contact me and not the other way around, because I feel like out of the two of us, you are doing the thing that carries immense value. And so me casually going like, oi, by the way, if you want, I might be available for an interview, all of a sudden turned into, maybe I'm not good enough for this league. So I am very humbled and I'm very happy to be on your Perpetual Chess podcast. It's an absolute joy to be here. Now, we already discussed a little bit about my background, so I will start there because I think it's an interesting thing and probably people would like to hear how one ends up as a chess coach. Not a lot of people, obviously, when they start their chess career, want to be a chess coach, and I certainly wasn't one of them. So when I was a junior chess player back in Hungary, I certainly wanted to become a professional player. And for a long while, the stars aligned for me really, really well. I started off at about the age of 8. I won a few local competitions back in Hungary. Then my local school invited a chess coach to come to our school. So I got proper coaching by this coach. Then this coach soon realized that there was hopefully some talent in this kid. And so he took me to the nearest town, which, by the way, although not a particularly big city, but it is actually what the location of the only nuclear power plant in Hungary. And the nuclear power plant is a major sponsor of this sport club. As you can imagine, it rakes in immense amount of money and thus is very generous with the sport club. And so consequently, not only the chess part or the chess segment of the sport club, but all of them were very well funded. And when the chess club started to take off, they immediately hired a couple of very good coaches. One of them was international master László Hazai, who is probably not as well known in the international circuit as he should be, but he was actually the coach of the Polgar sisters for the longest period of time as far as the coaching of the Polgar sisters is concerned. And this is a very little known fact. In fact, there is, as far as coaching is concerned, you will find that you cannot find too much about the background of the Polgar sisters. There's a bit of a hush-hush on about this for various reasons, but he's also very humble and quiet about this, but he spent years and years going to the Polgar's place on a weekly, or sorry, rather daily basis, 5 times a week for hours. And he was basically the one who started that absolutely breathtaking journey that the Polgar sisters then continued all the way to world fame. And so he became my coach a fair while after he stopped working with the Polgar sisters. And so I landed in the best possible hands in terms of chess coaching. And the chess coach I am today was very, very largely a result and an outcome of being a receiving end of one of the best coaches I've ever come across in my life. And that was, once again, international master László Hazai. And so his influence on me, not only as a chess player, but as a person, and yeah, he basically became a bit of a second father of mine because we spent a lot of time together. He even impacted my career choice as a teacher, because I did become later on a teacher, but I also majored in literature, which was definitely his effect on my career choice. I think it's a good time, Ben, that I stopped talking, because I guess I triggered a fair few questions.
Yeah, the questions are piling up already. Well, number one, I want to say thank you for the kind words. That's really nice of you to say. But as you say, you've been requested by many other people, and I can definitely see why after digging into your YouTube videos and your Chessable course. Number two, so following up on the legendary Polgar sisters, of course, and obviously Hungary has a rich chess history beyond that as well. So, of course, their training methods in particular are revered, and obviously their dad, László, has written about it to some extent, and of course written great training books in his own right, especially for club-level players. But what sort of material did and I'm sorry, I'm not even going to attempt his name yet on the first try, did your trainer, who, if you say it now, I'll try to repeat
his name is László. It's basically Leslie in Hungarian, or Lauren.
László, and what's the last name?
It's Hazai, which translates to domestic, basically. It's spelled Hazai.
Okay, so was László Hazai, the Polgars, of course, are legendary for solving tons and tons of tactics and doing endgame studies and that sort of approach to chess, less of an emphasis on openings. Is that kind of how you were brought up too?
On the contrary, no. At this point, I would like to bust a myth, or at least something that I consider to be a myth, at least. It's a very common concept in club level players, and here we are going to get into the real details of chess coaching and chess learning, that early on you shouldn't be learning opening theory, and instead you should be focusing on tactics and middle game structures and all that. And to a large degree, I agree with that. Tactics is absolutely vital, and all the way to 2000 and beyond, the vast majority of your learning should be revolving around tactics. That being said, when people start talking about, we should be learning middle game structures and middle game setups instead of learning opening theory, after a while, and it actually comes rather soon in my opinion, this statement loses its value about 99%, because a middle game structure is a result of an opening. You cannot possibly get into, for example, and once again, I'm getting into the nitty-gritty here, into an isolated queen pawn structure if you don't have the openings to back it up with and to actually land there. And so instead of doing what, in my opinion, is particularly harmful, learning middle game structures without the opening attached to it, why don't we just add an extra 10 to 15 minutes to the training session and actually learn an opening that leads to that structure, and so that we kill the two birds with one stone. And in fact, we develop that culture, which, by the way, doesn't really exist nowadays much, when we understand that there is no middle game without openings. And more importantly, you don't study the openings like an isolated segment of the game. You study the opening that leads into the middle game. it's very important to understand that the reason why we play openings is because we want to get to a playable middle game. And so it makes perfect sense to bring the two together. And to answer your question exactly, our coaching routine exactly followed this path, where we studied openings in incredible depth, which meant that the opening studies didn't stop at move 8 or 10 or 12, but went well into the middle game. And we actually spent the vast majority of our time by analyzing those middle game scenarios, but knowing full well the exact move order, how we got there. And so this whole approach became a very scientific one, which, by the way, appealed to me a great deal. And I still retain that. And that's why I'm very famously known in chess circles as the London hater, for example, among many other things, because our values were based on openings that provide large variety of structures in terms of pawn structures, and also, as a result of that, usually mainline openings. So I'm talking here about mainline Sicilian, mainline Ruy Lopez from White's point of view. But from Black's point of view, Slav, semi-Slav, King's Indian, all those immensely rich openings that offer you very, very entertaining gameplay, and at the same time, a lot of different structures that allow a lot of room for learning, for experimenting, to come up with new things. And so we merged the two together. We never studied middle games for the middle game's sake. We always studied middle games that occurred from a certain opening that was part of my repertoire. And I do think that that is the best approach towards middle games, is that, okay, we are a French player, so let's have a look at the mainline French and see what kind of middle games occur after theoretical lines up to move 15. That's the way I see it.
And should club level players really try to memorize the first 15 moves, or just play through the games and whatever, if you remember, great?
Look, memorizing things is frowned upon, like, oh, that's a terrible thing. But in the end of the day, unfortunately, it's just a necessary evil. So we have to suck up and accept the fact that if you want to get better, and really it doesn't matter what level you are on, there is no stage in chess where you can't get better by actually memorizing a little bit more openings. Now, I'm not saying that this should be your number one priority, but there is a bit of a tendency, in my opinion, nowadays on club level chess, where you hear more and more people saying that you shouldn't bother memorizing openings. Yes, you should. You absolutely should. You should stick to certain openings that you would like to play, and there is no harm whatsoever in mastering them. There is a lot of benefit, and I don't see any harm. There is harm in memorizing and not understanding.
Yes.
There is harm in memorizing openings and do nothing else. There is a lot of silly ways how I can turn it where it becomes silly, but there is a lot more ways where I can just make it sensible and actually definitely fruitful. Yes, do memorize your openings. Your openings are not going to memorize you, so you will have to memorize them.
Yeah, well, I think, okay, I mean, I have to admit, I'm one of the people that sort of, I generally dissuade lower club level players from spending a lot of time on openings. And the main reasons are, number one, that people, I think, spend too much time on openings. And number two, not everyone has the approach that you suggest. So they might be trying to memorize, they might be, even if they are spending time on openings, they might be placing an undue emphasis on, as you say, the memorization as opposed to the understanding. So let's say you are, like I saw in one of your videos, you mentioned Grandmaster Yermolinsky's The Road to Chess Improvement, and how he got from 2300 to very strong Grandmaster, as he's written about, by primarily just painstakingly dissecting his games. So what is the proper way for someone who's looking to improve to strike a balance between studying these famous games and not having memorization being your sole priority, but also knowing that it is helpful to know things, as you say, it can't hurt?
Yeah, look, in the end of the day, it's a very, very difficult juggle of time, because in the end of the day, everything all comes down to how much time do we actually allocate for chess. But equally importantly, and it's very, very important in my opinion, to be understood. And a lot of people don't really think about it enough. We need to decide what we want to do as chess players. Do I want to enjoy my chess as much as possible and not really care about improvement? Or do I focus solely on now I'm being 1600 to become 1800 as soon as possible? Because different goals and different mindsets require different training methods and training regimes. And a lot of people jump into chess without actually having a clear mindset of why am I here? What do I want to do? Because if your goal is to enjoy chess, then none of the above applies. Go for your life, play chess, and have fun. But if you want to actually get better, then in my opinion, it's very important to set up a regime. And to be honest, I do not have an exact answer to the question that you brought up in regards to Yarmolinsky and his method. But I have to tell you something that I think a lot of lower level club players either misunderstand or misutilize. And actually, this was one of the questions which probably I'm now preempting that you mentioned to me that it might come up. And that's in relation to coaching.
Okay, let me just hop in and read it because we have so many questions.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You were super popular. And it's funny because the supporters of the podcast, like I love when they send in questions, and they've been slacking, Andrey. It's like until our interview, there were not that many. I was not getting a lot of questions lately. I was like, is everyone busy Christmas shopping? What's going on here? And then we got you, who are, as I said, you're popular amongst the improver community. People enjoy your videos, and now we have like 10 questions that we got to work in.
All right.
So, and this one is from friend of the podcast who's done some super popular book recaps, popular on chess Twitter as well, Neal Bruce, who asked what are the primary benefits of having a chess coach?
Yeah, that was the one I was referring to. Yeah, and I'm very glad that Neal is part of this podcast too, because although he's another chess persona that I don't know personally, but got to know through my very short Twitter history, but I find him particularly motivational and a good role model to look up to if you are an adult improver. Now, I have been long thinking about this question because although I do have a ready answer, but I would like to give you a good analogy. So the question was exactly that: how much can a chess coach add to your improvement, or what do I think about doing chess by yourself versus working with a coach? And one analogy that came to my mind was, which I think is quite describing the situation, is that imagine that there's a hospital and they bring in a person with a broken leg, right, who needs an instant surgery. You have got two people looking at the same patient. There is a medical student who has been at uni for 4 years or 5, about to graduate, and there's a surgeon there who has been working as a surgeon for 25 years. They look at the patient and they have got the exact same diagnosis. They can name everything that is in front of them. They can name it in Latin. They can name the diagnosis. They can name what to be done. And probably they can both perform what's needed for the recovery of the for the patient. However, the guy with the 20 years experience there, in that 2 minutes when they are looking at the patient, recognizes 200 things based on his past experience that are not written in books, that are not part of the procedure, and yet super important. Whereas the medical student, blank fresh, totally just, newly out there, can put everything that he has learned so far into practice. But there is a limitation to what he sees and, how he perceives what's in front of him. Whereas the 20 years experienced doctor sees that, actually with the broken bone, there is a little bit of textile that went in from the pants he was wearing. That's going to cause a little bit of a difficulty with the surgery. He's going to probably incorporate the age, the gender, even the temperature, a million other things go through his head that will impact how he responds to that one unique situation. Whereas more than likely for the student, it's going to be just like any other broken leg. And so what I'm trying to convey with this is that the coach, to go back to chess experience, looks at the same game that you do, the person who just played it. You go through the analysis as the player, the club player who played it. You have got a view of what happened. Most of what you are saying and seeing is correct, but, and I'm going to, for the first, but probably last time, being a little bit harsh here, it's going to be shallow. It's not going to reach all the depth that are actually present right in front of you, that a coach looks at and he goes like, yeah, but that was a slight positional error there because you release tension in the center. Whereas for the player, it will be just, yeah, I took it. It's a totally logical follow-up. And in fact, it's not a mistake. The computer won't show it that it's a mistake. So you just go over it. And there are 10s, 20, 30 of these little things that you are almost inevitably not going to pick up as an improving club player. So the short answer for you and for all of those who are wondering about this, that in my opinion, the benefit of having a chess coach is that they accelerate certain learning curves immensely, or actually, equally importantly, they point out potential learning possibilities that you would totally overlook by yourself. So you play a game, you pick up I utilized this Greek gift motif beautifully, and we go like, yeah, pat on the back, awesome game, well done me. And with a coach, he will probably then point out a few calculating mistakes. He will show you that actually it could have been set up far better if you had done blah instead of blah, and so on. So basically, the learning curve becomes a lot shorter and a lot deeper. That's my very short answer for a very broad concept. It's not impossible to become very good at chess by yourself, but I do think that plateaus can be shortened a lot. And just in general, a lot of the times, and this is another example that I would like to tell you, a lot of the times I get coaching inquiries from students to be who send me games. They send the analysis with it, their own analysis, and they tell me what they should have done in the game. And I'm going like, so what exactly do you want me to do? You analyze your own game. You are giving me not only the diagnosis, but the cure to your problem. So what do you expect from me? And the irony is that more than half of the time when I receive these, both the analysis and the conclusions are totally wrong. Or if not totally wrong, but at fundamental points, they break down. So very often, because of they present it from their own view, with their knowledge, and I didn't mean to use the word limited or whatever, but obviously from a somewhat lower rated point of view, things look very differently. And so if you present me the facts and you think you have the solution, I all of a sudden go like, well, what do you want me to say? But I could take it apart and make 5 YouTube videos about the Amateur's Mind series, because it's so typical of how that person thinks instead of how they should think. So that's actually already a beautiful learning material. But if that person carries on learning by himself, then it's very unlikely that there will be progress to be made.
Yeah, good stuff. And as I've mentioned many times on the show, if you go to the Elite Chess Coaches page or the chess.com coaches pages, you can find coaches for a pretty affordable rate. So hopefully people can make it work. But as Andres says, if you need to improve on your own, you can. So Andres, I've got a follow-up question, but first let's take a break and hear from our aforementioned friends at Chessable.com. Perpetual Chess is proud to be brought to you in part by Chessable.com. I wanted this week to make sure you guys are aware of a couple things. Number one, you should definitely check out our guest, I am Andras Toth's courses, Chess Principles Reloaded Development and Chess Principles Reloaded The Center. As you can see, he is a very dynamic and engaging and enthusiastic chess presenter, so I especially recommend that you get the video courses, which are not too pricey and great for anyone rated below 2200. Also, the Chessable app is here for iOS. So if you have an iPad or an iPhone, check out the app, and it's a new way to train using Move Trainer technology from Chessable.com. So Andras, we've got a late arriving question that I did not send you in advance, but it's right in line with what we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. So this one is from Augusto Royobo, who says, one common recommendation for improvers is to analyze your games. That's in quotes. However, I'm not sure where to start and how far down a line I should go. Do you have a list of suggested steps to follow or a list of common mistakes that people in my level make? As a reference, I'm 1850 USEF. Also, what do you think is a good way to train strategic concepts at my level?
Okay, so it breaks my heart, Ben, that I can't talk to you whilst having a chessboard in front of us. It would make life so much easier. But following on the previous thought, and answering this question too, I think that, again, most of the club players actually fall short on chess principles. And that is exactly the reason, and I'm not promoting my material here, why I started my Chess Principles Reloaded series with Chessable, which has 2 courses already released and the 3rd one to be released very soon. And this is, again, another reason why I think a chess coach is handy. When I see this first time my student to really tension in the center for argument's sake prematurely, I will very bluntly and rather cruelly tell them that, hey, this was really, really unnecessary and bad, and you shouldn't do this. Okay? Now, if you think that that is then set in stone and we are not coming across that problem again, you couldn't be more wrong. And this is, again, in my opinion, a super important point why you regularly need someone to give you feedback. Usually, my experience from the past 10 years is that I repeated the sentence, do not release tension in the center unless you have got something to gain from it, a clear advantage. I have said this sentence at least 25 times per student. Per student. That means that they commit the exact same mistake in different environments on a regular basis. I'm not saying that students are silly or they don't understand. What I'm saying is that chess is an incredibly complex universe where you are confronted on a regular basis with a variety of chess principles. It's difficult to pick because sometimes one contradicts the other. And so we really need to reinforce these. And it's extremely hard to do so when A, you don't have regular support and you don't have someone who knows better than you to reinforce these concepts. And indeed, I think that the core of club level improvement is to understand these chess principles and to understand that they are actually applicable from the whole spectrum of chess players. So it's not something that you learn at 1400 and at 1800 they expire and you no longer use them. And a lot of people look upon it as such. And they, oh, yeah, putting pieces in the center, that's for kids. We are beyond that. Now we are playing chess. No. On the contrary. Totally the opposite is the case. You find that the higher level chess you observe, the more you find that the basic chess principles are being observed and meticulously followed and carried out. My last Chessable course, which is about development, features 5 world champions, and the average rating of the players from where I chose the games from is 2600 plus. And I'm teaching the very basic of chess principles through those games. So it's very important to see that this is not something that we learn and then, oh yeah, whatever. No, it really literally remains the most important foundation of your chess knowledge. The fact that you understand how to develop, and that's not about moving your pieces from the back rank out to the 3rd and 4th. It's to understand that sometimes you can actually afford losing material for it, that sometimes you can compromise your king safety for it. So it becomes more and more complicated. It's not just that, oh, on the first couple of moves, we need to move the dudes to the enemy's army. When under pressure, when you feel like there are 17 pieces hanging and there's a mate in 2 thread, you can still calmly calculate and carry out moves that are best supporting these principles. That's where it all comes to the fore. So to answer the question again, I think that on club level, it's very important that we do address chess principles. In order to do this well, I think you need to study classical games a fair bit. From my own experience, when I was a child, going through my first book cover to cover, it was Alekhine Selected Games. It was 300 Alekhine Selected Games. Unfortunately, the English translation of this book, I went through the Hungarian, which was a translation of the original Russian one, is not 1 book but 2. It's the one edited by John Nunn. I very highly recommend it to everyone, but that's by no means the only book that you can go through. But what it did for me was that I went through 300 Alekhine games with a chess book open on my right, a chessboard in front of me, and I just inhaled the whole thing like in a month. I mean, obviously, I had a lot of time being, just a school student, but I went through that book. Every single time I didn't understand something that wasn't explained in the analysis, I took a note and I took it to my coach. And I went like, oi, why is he playing here knight f6? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't tell me in the analysis. Then he explained to me. And so that book has very largely framed or shaped rather me as a player. And up to date, I look upon Alekhine as one of the greatest, and I really admire the style he used to play in. But once again, it can be any other book. In fact, prior to that book, with my previous coach, I went through another book cover to cover, which was Keres, My Road to the Top, which is also a brilliant collection of games explained. What amateur lower-level players need a lot is chess books with thorough analysis. Game collections are useless for learning unless they are thoroughly explained. It's very important that if you're learning by yourself and you rely on books, which I recommend you do, chess books are a beautiful source of learning. Be sure that you only touch chess books that have thorough analysis.
Yeah, and you're hardcore. I saw in one of your videos, you say you have to play through all the variations too.
That's why they are there. I mean, let's not delude ourselves. What's the point of going through a game? Like, imagine how badly you are only scratching the surface. Like, you know, a player plays a sacrifice that is quite deep. Inevitably, there are 5-6 lines that he needed to calculate and see in order to play it out. If you only allow yourself to go through the main line, you are basically denying yourself the best fun, the most amazing part of learning. About not even half a year ago, a couple of months ago, I gave a lecture on the Morphy Chess Club Discord server, which is actually a very large chess server. It has got, I think, near 1,000 members. And I went through a game from one of Dvoretsky's best book, which is actually quite a broad thing to say because almost all of his books are amazing, excelling at tactical calculation, I believe it was. And there was an absolutely breathtaking game in it that was very thoroughly analyzed first by Nunn and then by Dvoretsky. And we couldn't get through the one game in the allocated 1 hour and 10 minutes. So I actually demonstrated there to the crowd how I would, as a student, go through that game. And we played through every single line in the analysis. It's an absolutely breathtaking game. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the players, two lesser-known Russian players. I'm very ashamed, but I will look it up for you.
If you get it to me later, we can put it in the show notes.
I will look it up for you. It's an amazing, amazing piece of work. It's an attacking game in the perk where white literally throws in the kitchen and the sink and then beautiful refutations. The whole shebang is there. We could not finish the game. So yes, you do have to play through the sidelines because that's where all the secrets lie. Of course, it's like saying that when you play a chess game, you don't need to calculate lines. Of course you do. And when we are learning, we are modeling how we would play, or at least partly. And so it may sound tedious, but as far as I'm concerned, it's fun.
Oh, man, you're harsh. I mean, I get you. I agree that it's fun. It's just, as you've alluded to, everyone feels like time is so scarce, you know? Like, by my perspective, as I've mentioned before, I'm no Neal Bruce. So I feel like I'm lucky if I'm studying chess 7 hours a week. You know, I am back on the grind trying to get better, but that's a lot for me. I have 2 little kids, you know, work responsibilities, so on and so forth. So to spend like 2 hours on one game or, you know, whatever it may be, it just seems like, am I sure? Is this really the best use of my time? So what do you say to people who say that?
Look, Ben, to be honest with you, to that, my answer would be, yes, that is the best way to use your time, because you might not finish that game, but having gone through that amazing range of tactical sequences that game offers, if that doesn't teach you some really handy skills, then nothing will. And I'm very conflicted, by the way, by the fact that people have got so little time for chess, because it just sucks. I really would like people to have tremendous amount of time for their chess. And I do get that they don't, which, by the way, and I know that this would have come up, so I'm preempting another question, is part of the reason why I am rather well known in the chess community as a no-nonsense, rather blunt, occasionally bordering the rude coach.
I love it, yeah.
Now,
it's great.
It's not an act I'm putting on. I in real life, I'm a very, very mellow person. I hate conflicts. I really am the friendliest dude you can think of. But when it comes to coaching, I very quickly figured out that exactly, I'm working that what you just described. It's people who have got jobs, families, potentially other hobbies, and consequently very little time. Now, if they come to me with a game where they go like, look, I thought I played really well and I still lost. Can you please explain to me what went wrong? And then I start going like, oh, yeah, you played this really well. That may have been a slight error, but overall, I think it was a really good game and it's very unfortunate you lost. You are going to learn zilch. Absolutely nothing. If I tell you that, yes, it was a great game, but please be sure not to surrender the center the way you did, and other than that, you did well, more than likely you are still not learning. I really have to make my point stick because this could be the most important learning point about center for the next 6 months, for all we know. So I have to tell them that what you have done there to the center is absolutely ugly and disgusting, and don't do that again unless you want to really avoid that mistake and to win chess games. You can't possibly play chess without having a strong footing in the center, right? Now, if I say it like that, you will go like, well, you are a bit of a douche, aren't you? But at the same time, you are not going to forget that. My number one goal is for you to learn and to get better. I don't think I'm serving your goal if I'm telling you that, yeah, slight mistake, be sure that next time you focus a little bit more, good job otherwise. No learning taking place. If I show you exactly what you have done resulted in you totally surrendering the center and I stuck on the center, but I could have done anything else, use forcing moves to exploit your opponent's king, weak king, whatever, you are far more likely to remember. Yes, it stings, but you will remember. We are working for the same goal. Sometimes it hurts, but the outcome is going to be far more likely positive.
Well, I got to follow up, Andras, just from a pedagogical perspective, because I, as someone who also is a chess teacher, and I think I have a theory. I think a lot of chess teachers do a lot of work with scholastic players, myself included. And I took a class on the teaching the chess steps method with Jaap de la Mar, and he told me about this concept that I hadn't. And I know you have a teaching background that I hadn't heard put in these terms, but of course a lot of teachers have intuited it, which is he called it the sandwich, which basically he says in like Dutch pedagogy, you try to say something nice and then say what you really want to say, and then say something else nice.
Yes.
So, and I admit that I'm sometimes guilty of using that maybe to a fault. So how did you break away from that? And I'm also just curious, in your teaching kids background, are you as blunt?
No, I'm very different in the classroom. But remember that the classroom environment is very different because you are dealing with a large number of children who are ranging very widely in knowledge, personality, what they need, and so on. So for starters, and this is a very important distinction to be made, but I really don't want to talk too much about teaching. When you go to a school and to a classroom, not everyone is there because they want to be there. Right? Ideally, I never teach anyone for chess who doesn't want to be there. That is a huge difference. That allows me so much more room, to cut those sandwich breads very thin and cut the meat in between really hard and big because they want to be there. They came here to learn. And so I do everything in my power to enhance their learning. And I never intend to offend, but I'm willing to go as far as I can for that moment to be a learning moment. And so if I have to rub your nose into your own filth, which is probably a bit harsh to bring up an analogy, I would do that because that's how you learn the fastest. My goal is for you to achieve your goals. And some people may say, that's not for me, thank you very much. I respect that. No one has ever left me, by the way, for my coaching style. Not that I want to, polish the apple or to blow my own trumpet, but it's just what it is. And so, yes, in a classroom environment, I am a lot more mellow. It is very different. You are working with children. Their personalities are still developing. You really don't know, if you are approaching the problems from a harsher perspective, how that is going to really impact them. Some children then go complete introverts and they wouldn't open up. And so learning is by default prevented. You need a very good relationship with children. I work as a relief teacher, I work with children from the age of 5.5 to 12. They are like two totally different roles. So it's a day-to-day, case-to-case, child-to-child. You have to have a whole entire spectrum from 0 to hero, and you need to very wisely pick which teaching method, which pedagogy you pick for the subject, the child, the day, their mindset. Some of them come from very well-off families. Some of them come from very troubled backgrounds. The Lord knows what happened in that morning. So there's so many things to factor in with kids that makes you very careful and very cautious in your approach. The always be nice rather than be right is a very, very good leading policy, in my opinion, when you are teaching children. Whereas when you teach grown-ups who come to you and say, I want to get better at this, I always choose be right and be nice. Because there we have an unspoken, or more importantly, a spoken agreement. You and I are here to get the best out of you. I can't get the best out of you by niceties. I will never be purposely nasty, but I will be teaching you to the best of my ability to make sure that I highlight your errors so that we can make sure that they don't happen again. This is how I see it.
Okay, it's a great point, really. And we've got some more improvement questions coming your way. We'll get back to strictly chess improvement, but first we're going to take one more break, and then we'll be right back. Perpetual Chess is happy to be brought to you in part by our longtime friends but new sponsor, chessmood.com. If you didn't catch episode 192 with their founder, GM Avtek Gregorian, you should listen to it to see what he's about. Chessmood is a subscription-based website with courses covering opening repertoires for white and black, covering middle game mastery, end game mastery, and more. They also have lots of free content, such as a Chessmood blog with written features by grandmasters about stuff like chasing the 3000 blitz rating and how to improve your chess and your mental game. They have on YouTube now daily lessons with the grandmaster that you can check out and subscribe for free. So there's lots to check out, and I'll put all the links you need in the show notes, but the bottom line is go to chessmood.com and have a look around if you have not already. Okay, let's get back to the interview. So we've got another listener question, another Patreon supporter of the podcast. For anyone who hasn't heard this, people who contribute to Perpetual Chess, find out the guests, and in the case of Andras, are able to send in like a dozen questions. So here's one from Aryan Dubapov, who asks, he says, hi, Andras, I love your channel. I wonder how far do you think a typical adult 1500 OTB club player can improve with mainly calculation and tactics practice? I do look at master games, strategy books, and end games, but often I feel like I would understand them so much better if I was just way better in calculation and visualization.
Very interesting question that I would like to break down the answer to 2 bits. I have been working with mostly adults for the last almost 10 years. My chess coaching career in Australia started. In fact, my chess coaching career full on started in Australia when I came out here. When I started teaching chess, or coaching chess rather, my clientele looked like this: 9 kids, 1 grown up. That was the ratio. Okay. All of those 9 kids were very keen on chess. Many of them I took, actually 2 of them I took from whenever we started off to Australian Junior Champions. 2 of my students have reached international master title. One I took from 1500 to IM. Okay. Now from this, in a matter of years, quite frankly, Lord knows why and how, my clientele, which I hate to use the word clientele because I never look at my students as clients, but my students range went from 90% children, aspiring juniors, and 10% grown-ups to 99% grown-ups, 0 juniors. This requires a very, very different teaching method, a method that I haven't figured out yet. I do not have answers to everything. In fact, the more I teach grown-ups, the less I understand how it works. And I'm being absolutely and 100% genuine. And what I mean by that is that usually you find that when you teach children, it doesn't matter what you teach them. the vast majority of them are going to soak it up and understand it rather well. They have got an open mind, an open brain, and whatever you pour in there, it's likely to stick. With grown-ups, learning in general can be so vastly different, and I don't know the science behind it. And in fact, I should have looked it up already long ago, but I don't think that even the science could prove this correct. So that some grown-ups will start chess at 1500 and for the life of them will never cross 1700. Whereas others start 1500 and within 9 months, they are knocking on the door of 1900 with an excellent chess sense, understanding really well what should go where. So there are so many unknown quantities in this equation to me after 10 years of coaching that I simply don't have the answer. If you ask me how far can you go as a 1500 grown-up, my only answer to you is I have no idea whatsoever. Depending on how much work you are willing to put in, how much time you have, probably you can meet your realistic goals, whether it be 1900, 2000, and so on. But I find that usually somewhere around the 2000, 2100, there is a plateau that is very difficult to break down with further dedication to chess that probably breaches over how much time you can dedicate to it. Now, as for the material, can you get much better just by calculation? I don't think so. We always talk about tactics and calculation and all this stuff, but there is another very big component to chess that is very difficult to teach. I find it very hard to teach, despite of the fact that I claim to be good at this component of chess, and that is the generic idea that you look at a position, any position, from any opening at all, any random position, you look at it for 5 seconds and you have got a very good idea of who is doing what, who is playing where, and what are the general plans. You cannot ever be a very good chess player without having what I tend to call a chess sense. When you look at a board and at a cursory glance or a couple more seconds than that, you identify the main features. You roughly have the idea of who is playing what, and you can narrow down the best moves for both sides to, at the very most, 5 moves, no more than that. So the answer to the second part of the question, I do not believe that just by calculating like an absolute beast, you can be a good player. You need to understand strategy. You need to understand concepts, pawn structures, middle game plans, and the likes.
So I have to ask you, Andras, the question I ask a lot of guests, which is, so how do you think you should allocate your study time? Like if you have 10 hours a week, what percentage on whole games, what percentage on openings, what percentage on tactics, what percentage on end games? And then you've got like your own games to analyze, which is, you know, its own sort of squishy category.
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot now, real big time. By the way, I do get this question more and more on YouTube and on the various outlets where I function as a chess personality. Very difficult to tell, and I don't want to dodge the question, I want. But I'm telling you that the answer depends on the strengths and weaknesses of the player. If I have got a player who has got an excellent tactical sense and in general good at tactics, I am more than happy to cut back on the tactics. So let's say that out of a 10-hour day or a 10-hour working routine, cut it back to 2 hours and spend a big chunk on analyzing your own games and another fairly big chunk on studying classics. And chucking even the end games there. I don't think that I would ever go below 2 hours out of 10 for tactics. But here I, again, need to emphasize one thing, because the more I teach, the more I think that people don't do tactics effectively. I think there is a lot of mistakes. There are a lot of mistakes made in the process of what people think they are doing in the process of doing tactics when people think they are doing tactics well, but in fact they don't. So let me elaborate on this. When you are solving tactics is not that you look at a puzzle on the screen, you think you have the first move, you play it out, it gets proven wrong or correct. If it's right, you play on and you figure out the moves one by one, and in the end you go like, yeah, well done me. Or if it gets wrong, you look up the solution and you hit yourself on the forehead and go like, oh my God, how did I not see that next? This is not learning. So when you are solving tactics, and this is something that I used to do as a student with international master László Hazai, it used to be the following. He gives me a puzzle, a piece of paper, and a pen. He says, here is your puzzle, solve it. Best moves for white and black. Give me the line. I would write down the line from beginning to end. Anywhere where there are serious sidelines to be considered for the defending side, I write it down too. I then hand over the paper, I am done. He then looks at it and then either says correct or, okay, you haven't elaborated this sideline well enough, hence the paper back, work it out. And so I'm presenting from a position a sequence of complete lines, not moves, lines in their entirety with a conclusion in the end. I don't think that people solve puzzles with this religious attitude of, I need to solve it in its completeness, have something that is an evidence that you have done it. It's very important because humans tend to delude themselves. It's human nature that you go like, oh yeah, knight f6, king g7, queen h7 mate. Okay, check the answer. Oh, actually queen h7 wasn't mate. That's fine, it's mate after, so I got it right. And they move on. No, if you thought it was mate and it's not, that's a fail. That's not that close enough. No, you didn't visualize the thing correctly. That means you did not solve it. The fact that there was a mate after is a total fluke. Next time when you make a visualization error like that, it's going to be you lost. So that's a fail. You need to have a line fully written down. Then you check. If you do not have a coach, you check the solution. If they do not match, you need to figure out what you did wrong. You need to set it up on a board, play out the line, try to figure out if you can potentially, with the aid of the computer, why your line was wrong, and then draw a conclusion that I stuffed this up because at one point I didn't calculate the forcing line, checks, captures, threats, as chess coach Andras would teach me. And so now there is learning taking place. This again slows down the process a lot, makes it tedious, makes it sound like it's work, not fun. And I'm aware of that. But again, if the goal is to learn as much as you can, then unfortunately, this is, in my opinion, the only path to mastery. And we did this also, by the way, and people don't necessarily understand the importance of this, a lot with pawn endings, very difficult pawn ending studies, because one of my greatest weaknesses when I was a junior was that my accuracy in calculation was lacking. I very often would get winning positions against far higher rated people than myself because I had a very good sense for opening and middle game play. But when it get to the position where the finish off needed to be done, I would often fail to find the execution. And so we focused a lot on working out pawn endings. Pawn endings are one of the most underrated tools to use in one's ability to calculate. And the reason why people don't necessarily make the connection, because what is further away technically from a checkmating puzzle in the realm of chess? Pawn endings, right? So a checkmate puzzle has a million pieces and an exposed king. A pawn ending has got some pawns and some kings and ta-da, nothing else. But a pawn ending is a miniature version of a hard calculating exercise because you have got fewer pieces, but you have got deep, long variations. So you can actually sort of mimic the big thing by doing the small thing first and excel this very important aspect of chess, which I tend to call just accuracy in calculation, that you calculate really accurately and that you develop this in yourself that a lot of amateur players, by the way, don't have as a habit, to expect, to anticipate, and to actively look for the opponent's best move. This is something that 99% of club players absolutely underutilize or don't do at all. I sometimes like to do this when I'm have a student play a game against a computer, and whilst the game is going on, he plays a move. I'm following the game. We are on the phone, and I go like, okay, what will they do now? I don't know. I'm like, what? I don't know. So then I go, okay, so every time you play a game in chess and you don't know what the most likely response is that is coming at you from your opponent, you are actually not playing chess. That's a coin toss. Because then we have got no concept whatsoever of what is going on the board. That's your game. How can you possibly not know what you are afraid of, what you think is coming at you, and how you handle that? So usually I have got two scenarios in my head that I like to describe to my students. When you play a game and the move is coming at you, then there are two scenarios. A, I expected that, and I think it's good. And then you already have a ready response before it even happened. Or B, something lands on your board that completely catches you off guard, in which case you have got two scenarios. Either it's utter garbage, or the dude is playing way out of your league and outclassed you because he played a move you didn't even think of, and it's actually amazing. There is not really a gray area in between these two, but the point what I'm saying is again, like, you must know what's coming at you. If you don't, you are not playing chess. It's just sitting there over a set of pieces, waiting for something to happen that is not the least in your control.
Yeah, Agard said the same thing as you about writing down all the moves when you're calculating, so you've got a good company.
Yeah, you have got some great education in how to be a great chess educator. Well done, Ben.
Oh, thanks. All right, we got another question. This is from a big fan of yours, Michael Rosenberg, who I believe is one of the people who requested you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Very kind.
So Michael says, being in the over 50 chess player club with less than 2 years of experience, correspondence games have been the bulk of my play along with OTB. That means over the board. What is your experience and advice to best move into 10 and 15-minute time control? My confidence in my play decreases drastically with the time pressure built into these time controls.
Oh my God, Ben, you just opened up another can of worms and you won't be able to zip me up for another half an hour. Okay.
Perfect.
Let me break this down again into separate components, because this question has got a lot of sub-questions in it well concealed. First of all, I think that transitioning from correspondence chess to, I was going to say over the board chess, but unfortunately we can't say that, but shorter time control, because now of COVID times we can't really play over the board, is one of the hardest transitions to ever make for a chess player. It's extremely difficult. And the reason for that is the following. As a correspondence player, you are allowed to, and in fact encouraged to, do the direct opposite of what I just said in the previous question. And that is to calculate in depth without moving the pieces. The mere existence of correspondence chess is founded on the idea that you have a position ongoing in your game, you set it up at home, and you analyze the position for hours, for days, by moving the pieces. Then you find the best, you send off your little letter with a lovely message, and done dusted. This can't happen in real chess. In real chess, the greatest difficulty is that you can't move the pieces, and so you have to visualize a lot. This transition is incredibly difficult. It's a huge, huge change. And a lot of people find it very, very challenging. In fact, I would find it extremely surprising if someone with an exclusively oriented chess career oriented towards correspondence chess could make that transition smoothly towards over the board. You will find that the vast majority of hugely successful correspondence players were very good, or at least good over the board players. Successful correspondence players don't appear out of nowhere without having solid chess background. You can't possibly achieve that. And it's hard. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you plan to transition from correspondence to over the board chess, it's going to be hard. And my focus for getting better would be on visualizing exercises. And that leads back to previous question. Puzzles, reasonably easy at first, later on more complicated pawn endings solved without touching any pieces. If you can do that, and you can focus on that, then I think there is a lot of room for improvement. At first, be very generous with your time control. I do not think that 15-10 is going to cut it. I think that it needs to be extended towards more like the 2010 or even beyond, because a lot of correspondence players find time very stressful. And on this note, I just wanted to mention one thing that I find very interesting and difficult to deal with. You will find that club players, especially those who started chess as grown-ups, have a very different perception of time than people who started early on. And what I mean by that is that on a regular basis, I come up or I encounter scenarios from my students' games where they have got a totally clearly winning endgame, like a rook ending with 2 connected pass pawns, an endgame with an extra piece, you name it. And they have got a minute and 30 seconds on the clock with 5-second increment. And they said, I couldn't convert, I was in time trouble. And I would be like, what time trouble? You have got a minute and 30 with 5-second increment. You should beat Carlsen with that much time. And they think I'm kidding. And I think they are kidding. And so there is this very weird interaction where we both think that, what is the other guy on? And it's a matter of perception. Because if you grew up, like I have, for example, in a chess playing environment where digital clocks were totally unknown, therefore extra time and additional bonus time was totally unknown. Time trouble meant you had a set amount of time, no increment, and that's it. So yeah, you have a minute to win this totally winning position, and if you fail, you fail. With the introduction of time increment, time trouble has not lost its meaning, but it has evolved into something altogether different. In my opinion, increments have allowed people to convert winning positions at ease. But somehow the idea that, oh, time is too pressing, I can't convert, still seeped into the language and the common practice of amateur players, where in fact time is not really an excuse to not convert because the position is so easily convertible that the extra time guarantees success. Now, obviously, it comes very obnoxious and arrogant from an international master with probably a lot of experience with this type of scenarios too. But you need to understand that a lot of it comes actually from poor self-confidence and also from the fact that they do not have enough practice in actually converting these end games. They haven't had hundreds of games behind them where they would just blitz it out and win it. And so the time factor plays a very different role, I find, in today's chess with the amateur player, where their concept of time trouble is very different from players of 20 years ago. And it's, I think, something that is trainable, but it's very difficult to train because the vast majority of the problem is actually not chess related. It's psychology. It's people allowing themselves to feel some sort of pressure because of the clock. It's a very tricky story to train, and in my opinion, the only way to do it is to regularly try to convert basic endgames with very little time on the clock, but with increment against a high level of stockfish.
Yeah, well, this is like tangentially related, but when I interviewed Naroditsky, he was saying like one of the reasons he's so good at bullet is because he knows exactly how long it takes him to win various positions. Like whatever it might be, like a rook and pawn ending or whatever it might be, he knows exactly how long it can take. So he's able to sort of steer into positions accordingly.
Yes. Yeah, and also, see, this is the big thing that Daniel is a very interesting example to bring up because he's a young, extremely talented, full of confidence person. Now, if you compare that to a 50-year-old club player who started playing chess 5 years ago, they don't have that immense self-confidence that from this position, I can beat anyone. So, like I said, I think it's a mix of actual knowledge and a mix of psychology that you can actually do it and you must believe it. But obviously the psychology alone is not going to cut it. You have to practice these things. But I do believe, Ben, that there is a very important line to be drawn where you go like, if you had this position with this much time, there is virtually no excuse for you not to win it against your current opponent against Magnus Carlsen or Stockfish. Because if you have 4 pawns up in a rook ending and there's nothing else on the board, then there should be no reason for you not to win that if you had 2 minutes with increment on the clock. It's a stress management more so than chess knowledge management, the way I see it. But once again, it's difficult to train for. And once again, we come up to this catch-22. Who has time to practice these kinds of things when we hardly ever have time to open up a meaningful book to learn some really good things about chess?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. All right, one more on time management. This one is from Richard Davidson. Thank you for the support, Richard. So Richard says, I found I'm terrible at online blitz games and poor at rapid games. Most often I lose on time. It is difficult for me to find uninterrupted time for longer time control games. And I know that's something you've talked about in your videos.
Correct.
Recently, I tried chess.com's daily games and enjoyed that style more. And it doesn't matter if there are interruptions while figuring my next moves. My question is regarding chess improvement. What, in your opinion, are the pros and cons of playing primarily daily games as opposed to other time controls?
Okay, surprise, surprise. I'm going on a tangent now. Never happened before. Look, the first and foremost, I really like to clarify this with almost everyone who I talk to about chess, that chess has moved online immensely, more so than we would have ever thought about it. It was partly because of COVID, but I think in general, the transition for chess to go online is immense. I am one of those dinosaurs who still think and say, and I act accordingly too, by the way, that chess is a game that is played on a three-dimensional board, ideally wooden, with wooden pieces, because we respect what is most precious to us. So we play on a beautiful wooden carved board with beautifully wooden carved pieces in 3D in life against a human who is sitting on the other side of the board. And so everything you do online is a means to an end. And the end is when finally we all get somehow through COVID, whatever way it is, the chess clubs open up and we walk back to the chess club, we set the clocks and we play a proper time control game. That is the main show. Everything else we do is preparation to that. I really, really think that one of the best things you can do with your chess life is that when you set goals, they are not online related. They can be partial goals. They can be that, okay, we would like to reach this, but the big deal is have an over-the-board goal, try to play over-the-board chess, and try to expand your chess activities towards that direction. Again, I know it's time-consuming, but almost everyone I find has the time to play at least 3 or 4 competitions a year that is over the board, even with jobs, with family. And I think that it's very important that we gear our chess towards that, because a lot of people have moved from that to, oh, I'm playing 15-10, but I'm not really improving. And part of me is really, really triggered to say, and who cares? Since when was 15-10 chess? 15-10 hardly allows you to sit down, calm yourself, gather your thoughts, put everything together for a game of chess. Chess, in my book, is a game that lasts 7 hours. Unfortunately, that time is gone. So my compromise now is that I'm more than happy to accept a 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment as the highest quality chess we can get. But that is where chess starts. 15-10 is just scratching the surface. It's a beautiful tool to practice your openings, to practice calculations, to come up with new openings where you can figure out things, how they work. But please focus on this as your method. It's not your goal. For those very few who can't possibly ever play over-the-board tournaments, it's a lot harder. But then I still encourage you to extend the time control, play online tournaments, play whatever you can. The longer time control, the better. The exact question was related to day chess. Not going to lie to you, I don't know what that is, but my assumption is that you can actually play moves across the day, or there is no time pressure on you. I don't find that good. I recommend you do that only if all else fails. Exactly, because it's just a huge distraction. Like, you can't possibly be focused and understanding and processing the game move by move, and to be, just fully focused on the plans, the strategies, the whatnot, when you are constantly having breaks from the board, doing something else, going back to it. It's not the real thing. It's like, imagine reading a novel where after every 10 pages you take a 2-hour break and you go back to it. It's not going to be the same. Yes, you will get to the end of it, you will put the pieces together, but it's nowhere near the same experience. So as best as you can help it, try to steer towards longer time controls, but not daily.
Okay, so that's good advice, Andras, for Richard. But I got to follow up a little bit, because so many people now are discovering chess online. So, I mean, I'm sure some people listening discovered chess online and have never played a tournament before. Like, I know I've cited this story before, but John Bartholomew did like a chess meetup, and he was saying like he couldn't believe when 75% of the people who showed up had never played a tournament. They've just discovered him online and gotten into chess from there. So I'm sure there's some people who are already sold on trying tournaments, but there might be some other people who like online is all they've ever known. So what would you say to those people? I mean, because it sort of sounds like what you're delegitimizing the way that they've learned and improved at chess so far.
Oh, sorry. If I am treading on anyone's toes in that way, I didn't mean to do that. But I think, the fact that you learn chess online and you only play chess online doesn't negate the fact that chess is played on a chessboard, and you know it. I don't think there is anyone in that circle of Johns or anyone around the world who learns chess online who wouldn't know that this is a game that is played on a board. Now, once again, I don't want to take away any credit from them or, illegitimize their achievements. What I'm saying is that in an ideal world, you should be aiming to play over the board, and you should set your goals for that. Unfortunately, right now, we're not living in an ideal world. The world we're living right now, when this podcast is being recorded, is when we have got a pandemic across the globe that disallows us to do a lot of things that we previously took for granted. For example, to sit down at a table and play a game of chess. And so a lot of people went like, okay, in the absence of over-the-board chess, I would like to get better at online chess. What I was trying to actually preempt and actually have a positive spin on it, although it didn't come off like that, was that there are a lot of players who are excellent club players with greater time controls, but when they start playing online, they find that their results are decreasing, partly because they are not used to seeing things in 2D instead of 3, but also because of the time control is far less allowing or accommodating for them. So we now sort of look at this whole problem, in my opinion, back to front. We are approaching chess from the online perspective and look upon over the board as something that hardly ever happens. And I don't like that. I think that the right way to look at it is that chess happens over the board, and now we have the ability to play a lot online. And in my opinion, we should maximize this opportunity wisely and in a planned fashion. But let's not forget that right now, as we speak, the Tata Steel tournament is on, where Magnus Carlsen just defeated Alireza Firuzia in the most impressive fashion on a 3D chessboard. That is the epitome of chess, and I can't wait to get back to that. Of course, I understand that you don't have time. Mind you, I do not really believe that no matter where you live in the world, that you couldn't find a chess club somewhere in your area. So I think it's a matter of researching a little bit and being actively on the lookout for opportunities to play over the board. If you can't do that, and you can only play chess online when you can steal a half an hour lunch break or whatever, I obviously am for it. But obviously the person who has only that much time cannot have the same goals as someone who is a regular player in a club with 10 hours of time on their hands and the drive to become a better player. And unfortunately, I tend to be a little bit of a single-minded person. And very often when I say generic things, I actually approach it from the perspective of a player who has the desire to get better. Because me as a coach primarily focus on this.
Okay, good stuff. So we've got a couple more improvement questions for you, Andras, and then I want to get into your background a little bit because we've hit it here and there, but I want to get the whole story nailed down. So this one I believe I sent to you, which is good because otherwise it would be really putting you on the spot. This is a question from John Quist, who says, if you could give 5 Chessable courses, either paid or free, that you could recommend for USCF players rated below 1,000. Thank you for your expertise.
Oh my God. Actually, I do remember this question. And when I saw it, I went like, oh my word, what do I say to this? And it's a particularly awkward question, to be honest with you, because being a Chessable author, now I will have to tread on fellow Chessable authors inevitably, because, it's just, basically it's picking up a few drops from the ocean. But if you don't mind, without trying to dodge the question, I think it's more of I can look upon it as a generic question. What is the most important thing I can start with as a chess player? And I think that you need to understand the basics of the game. And there we are obviously stirring towards chess principles. And it is obviously now looking like I'm setting myself up for a massive sale of my own courses, because they are titled Chess Principles Reloaded 1, 2 already released, and 3 is coming up very soon. But what I'm trying to say is that try to look for things that cover generic concepts. So if you are a starter outer, you don't need to know what exactly the best move is on move 18 in the martial attack for black. Guaranteed you will find an amazing course by probably Jan Gustafsson, if I recall rightly, on e4, e5, that will deal with that. And with all due respect to the amazing work of Jan Gustafsson, you probably won't need it yet. And so
no way.
To purposely avoid naming my courses, I would go for something like 100 endgames you must know. No questions asked. Definitely would be on the list. Okay.
Now this is below 1,000, to be clear, because I think that's ambitious actually for someone below.
Was it below 1,000? Holy cadoodle. Well, even then, because there are some endgames in there that are very basic.
Yeah, I mean, John Bartholomew, I think, did a Chess Fundamentals game series that I believe is free. That would be a good place to start. Susan Polgar's 5 courses.
Ben, you know Chessable courses better than I do, man. You did start you.
I looked at the question too.
Checkmate. There's a checkmate patterns there. There is a
Yeah, that is amazing. Honestly, that goes pretty high up. Like, you could get something out of it below 1,000, but like it gets pretty challenging. That's the one that Geert was filming with like Anish Giri and Magnus Carlsen, where they're doing the final test.
Yeah, right.
So that one's pretty. There's also just like mastering mates, checkmates in 1, checkmates in 2. So just sort for beginner and look for checkmate patterns and Susan Polgar's course, as I already mentioned, which is 5 courses on its own. So that's my 2 cents. But Andras, I feel like you're very in tune. I've noticed from your videos with like what ails different players at different levels. But below 1,000, that's really getting your feet wet.
Yeah, I think, Ben, that this question was better directed at you than me, for sure. Yeah, my comment will be, once again, probably dodging the question to some degree, but it's definitely go for the generic stuff.
Yeah.
Something that covers broad concepts. By the way, the one I was thinking about was 1001 Deadly Checkmates, which came out recently.
Yeah. That's a good choice. And I will mention that Andras has two different YouTube videos, recommended books for 1,000 to 1,700 and a 1,700 to 2,200, which definitely have some good stuff in there. And even though it's not a podcast, those could function as a podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they're basically you just talking about what chess books you think are best. So I would recommend people check those out as well.
Thank you.
So I think, and that gets to the question from Richard Hallenbeck. Which chess books do you think best explain your passionate approach to chess fundamentals?
Yeah, I think I would refer back to, again, the videos. I do talk a lot about chess fundamental videos. Funnily enough, books. One of my favorite books, which I actually never read as a chess player, I came across it as a coach, is Sunil Veeramantri's chess book, which I very highly recommend to anyone, coach or player. to go through, because this is a lovely little book that I think is so underestimated and undervalued. It's called Best Lessons of a Chess Coach by Sunil Veeramantri. If you find the name a bit strange or unknown, it's an interesting tidbit to know that Sunil Veeramantri is actually the stepfather of Hikaru. And I believe, if my facts are correct, that he has had a major impact on Hikaru becoming a chess player. And so Sunil covers a lot of very important concepts, extremely thoroughly explained. That's why that book is pure gold, because on almost every step of the way, and I talk about this in the YouTube video too, by the way, it stops after almost every single move and explains to you what's being done and why it's being done. And so that, I think, is a very good way to start with understanding chess principles when it comes to reading good chess books.
And what about your passion and your enthusiasm? The other half of his question, where do you think that is? That just natural?
You mean about chess principles in particular?
No, just your general, like your general presentation. You can see that you're very, very passionate about chess.
Look, it is again a little bit in line with the way I teach, which, as we described earlier, maybe a little bit crude or unpleasant at points, but also the passionate side comes from me. I suppose that's the only way to teach. Like, if you are not passionate about something, I don't believe that you can teach it with the same potential outcome. I mean, who would be passionate about it if not me who is teaching it? I mean, imagine if you are being lectured by a dude who just can't wait to be out of that lecture hall and have a coffee with his mates after that horrid lesson. You are not going to learn there. But equally importantly, you can't fake passion. The same way how you can't fake a lot of other positive feelings, love, tenderness, care. These can't be faked, probably in the short term, but not in the long run. And so if you are not passionate about these things, I don't think that you can achieve your goals. And since my goal usually is related for somebody else to achieve their own goal, it not only requires enthusiasm, but compassion as well. But I'm genuinely interested and invested in my students' achievement, and even people's achievements who I don't consider my students, people who comment on YouTube that your channel is amazing, I learned so much, and your channel is the most underrated YouTube channel out there in chess, which is, by the way, a title I have been long holding. That makes me really, really happy. I consider that dude, who I have no idea who he is or she, where they write from, they are my student because I impacted them by my passion, by my knowledge, or the combination of the above. But once again, it's a tricky question to answer because, like, it's just who I am, I suppose. I love chess, and so this is how I present things about it. There are other things that I'm very passionate about, and I also respond to those things in a very similar fashion. And my main hobby is tennis, and you can't possibly see me not being passionate about tennis, no matter what the circumstances are, whether it's me hitting balls or watching it. So I suppose it's just who I am.
Okay. And I wanted to get a little bit more about your background. So first of all, I saw you mentioned online somewhere, and as we've talked about, you've got a teaching background. Are you still teaching full time, Andras?
Okay, so long story. I was about to kick off again. So I pursued my professional chess playing career very seriously in my late teens. I became an IM just after 18, and then I wanted to become a GM, or I considered it very seriously. I was training rather hard, but unfortunately that was also the time when I had to, well, not have to, but had to, but it was kind of expected to go to uni. And so I did. And basically going to university eventually meant that I had less and less time for chess to learn, to compete, the whole stuff. And so somehow, not necessarily by an outspoken decision, but I have given up on becoming a professional player. In hindsight, by the way, I don't really regret it. But I would like to say that as a positive thing, but I will elaborate on that a little bit later. So I became, by profession, a teacher, but also I majored in literature, both Hungarian and world literature. So that basically qualifies you in Hungarian terms to teach between year 1 to year 12. And after I graduated from uni, I couldn't find a teaching position. And then a local TV station was recruiting reporters. And I thought, why not? So I went along. And so I scored a job for a rather short period of time to, basically do news and sport broadcasts. And the sport broadcast element is something that I absolutely love to bits. It's because I really love sport. And I was actually live broadcasting basketball, which I was particularly passionate about. I still am. But back then I followed the Hungarian league so that I knew every single team, starting five, all the players on the bench, everything. So that was actually chess coming handy with memorizing stuff, because I just knew everything inside out. Like, there was no way I wouldn't know what was going on a basketball court. And so I dearly loved it. News was really something that I absolutely despised doing. And unfortunately, that was the majority of the job. And so I was already looking to do something else. And then my chess coach, who we previously mentioned, told me, in fact, multiple times, that there was a family in Australia who was looking for a coach for their 3 children, and potentially with further coaching opportunities. And so I went like, all right, let's do that. And so I decided to shoot an email off to this lady, and we started to talk. And a couple of months later, she sorted out my visa, and I landed in Australia with the prospect of being the chess coach of her 3 children. She sorted out another 2 students for me, and about 5 schools on the ready for a lunchtime chess club. And so,
where in Australia?
Canberra.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of my chess coaching career, really. It was a very interesting start, because I thought that I had a good command of English. And after arriving and landing in Canberra, I very soon realized that not really. So that was very interesting cultural shock. But yeah, that's how it all started. Then for a short while, not really a short while actually, it was a number of years, I mostly worked as a chess coach in Canberra. So a business that is based on chess coaching actually took over my sponsorship, a Sydney-based company that is specializing on chess coaching. The Sydney Academy of Chess took over my sponsorship, and so I became their employee, and I worked for them as the Canberra branch of that company, if you will. And I taught chess in multiple primary schools. But whilst I was doing that, it just didn't feel quite enough, both in every possible way you can imagine. It was limited work hours, limited possibilities, blah, blah, blah. So at that time, I had a flatmate who was a teacher himself. In fact, an executive teacher, so that like a assistant principal. And he told me that, you have this teaching qualification of yours. Why don't you try to get it recognized and you could teach? And so then I went into the Department of Education here. We went through all the processes. It was an absolute nightmare, as you could imagine, with a Hungarian degree that basically had nothing to do with English to get it recognized in Australia, where these regulations are actually very firm and clear. It was not an easy ride by any stretch. Lots of extra exams, language exams, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, in the end of the day, I got the green light, and I was allowed to teach primary. Obviously, primary only because with my Hungarian, that's not a subject in an English-speaking country. And although technically I could teach literature, but I never wanted to push that angle. So I became a primary school teacher. And so that's what I have been doing now for almost 8 years. And in that 8 years, I did almost all kinds of teaching. So I had my own, so I was full-time teaching. I had my own class. I was responsible for that class throughout the year. I filled in for shorter contracts, which means that a part of a year I am teaching the class is mine. And I also did part-time gigs where I didn't teach every day of the week, but 1 or 2, and then I would be relief teaching, which I think in the US called substitute teaching. And that is exactly what I do now. So now I am a relief teacher, but actually what it really translates to in my case is that I almost am employed full time, because teachers are always away, sick, on conferences, whatever. And so what it means is that there are 200 days in Australia that are school days. So it's 4 terms of 50 days, 10 weeks. And out of the 200, I usually am employed somewhere around 180 to 190 days.
Okay.
And so what that has allowed me to do, and it was actually a conscious choice that I have made when I went from full-time teaching to relief teaching, is that now I have time. I always did, but that was a bit pushing it, to do private coaching in the afternoons, in the evenings, and on the weekends. So my usual day is that I go to work, let's say I arrive at work at 8, the school finishes at 3:10. I hang around, marking, tidying up classroom, whatever. I am home between 3:30 to 4. I have a bit of a break between 4 and 6. And from 6 to either 6 to 7 or 6 to 8, depending on the day, I have got either 1 or 2 lessons every day of the week. And then I have got lessons in the weekend as well.
And when are you doing all your YouTube videos?
And when do I spend time with the family? And when do I do tennis?
Yeah, exactly.
Ben, it's not only the amateur player who is struggling for time.
Yeah.
So the YouTube videos are done in between or whenever I can find a time. Like right now I am due to release. And so I have to record a video right after this. YouTubing is something that I really wanted to develop and grow as much as I can. It's a very bitter experience. It has been so far because it's a very double-sided sword, or I don't know what the right expression is here, but I've got a very small follower base who basically love me to bits without wanting to sound, full of myself. But at the same time, it really does break my heart that despite of what I think is outstanding content, the follower basis is nowhere near where other YouTube channels of similar genres are. And so in order to boost this channel up, a student of mine who is now sort of working for me, if you will, on my YouTube channel, doing all the editing, the uploads, the maintenance of the YouTube channel has entirely gone out of my hands to his. And all I'm doing is recording the content. Without it, I wouldn't be able to do it. It would have already collapsed, wouldn't exist. But with that, I can just manage so that I only have to do the recording and that's it. I can just manage. But we agreed on a routine that I would release a video every 3rd day religiously. We have been doing this now for almost half a year, and it has yielded in some growth, not the level I would have liked, but this is what it is. And so, yeah, that's how I manage it. Without that particular student of mine, I would have already gone underwater with YouTube. It's just not maintainable.
Yeah, well, shout out to your student. And Andres, I do want to reiterate that your content is great, especially for club improvers. I recommend they check out your Amateur's Mind series.
Thank you.
And I interviewed Levy Roseman. Speaking of these, stratospheric YouTube stars.
Yeah,
I interviewed him. I think it was in March, but whenever I interviewed him, I was impressed with his content, and I felt like he had a decent little foothold. He was doing some announcing for chess.com,
yep.
but he had less than 10,000 YouTube subscribers, I'm pretty sure. And here we are, less than a year later, and he has 430,000 or something.
Yeah, no, he went from 0 to hero in 6 months exactly.
Yeah, just absolutely insane. Yeah. So I know it's tough, but I mean, I do think the quality of your videos will be recognized. So I encourage you to stick with it. But again, it can be thankless at times, or at least not remunerative, based on the amount of time you put in.
Well, that's exactly the difficulty of being a YouTuber, which I certainly not consider myself to be, because I don't essentially make anything out of it. Really, is that you don't know what it's gonna yield. If I decide that I have 10 chess lessons a week, I exactly know what the yield is, right? So I know, what it's worth, what I'm losing in terms of time, what I could spend elsewhere versus what I gain out of it. With YouTubing, it's completely stabbing in the dark. You have no idea, and in fact, you do have a very good idea. For the time being, it's definitely not worth it. That's where I stand right now. It's 100% not worth it. But you never know when it takes off, when all of a sudden you go like, wow, that was amazing. Just like the way how Levy's channel has gone to stratospheric heights, when all of a sudden you go like, well, imagine if I had quit 2 months ago, where would I be now?
Right. Yeah. The proverbial person digging for gold who stops
precisely
one shovel before they get there.
I will be honest with you. The growth of the channel, the current growth, is just good enough for my liking to not give up digging.
Yeah, it's tough. Okay, we got a couple more biographical questions. This one is from Aaron Percival. Thank you for the support, Aaron. So he says, I'm an Australian now living in New Zealand. I was wondering what Andras thinks of the chess culture in Australia and New Zealand. I know that he lives in Australia, and it appears he's competed in New Zealand at least a couple of times, scoring a draw against New Zealand-born GM Murray Chandler in a 2008 tournament. He also played FM Nicholas Crode that year, who was the winner of the recent 2021 New Zealand Chess Championship. So shout out to New Zealand. It's high on my list of countries I want to visit, but we'll pass the question over to you, Andras.
Thank you. First of all, shout out to Erin for saying that I played against Nick Crode instead of saying that I absolutely got butchered by Nick Crode in that game. So that's awesome. Whereas she very politely mentioned that I drew against Murray Chandler. I was winning in that game, by the way, too. So for the historical accuracy. First of all, not to avoid the question, but I must say this. I basically participated in 2 tournaments in New Zealand in that tour, so to speak. I played in an open tournament and I played an international master round robin. The less important story that goes there is that I forgot my plane departure time and I nearly missed the tournament, which would have been pretty bad given that I was one of the IMs. So without me, the IM round robin would have been cancelled. Luckily, the organizer up to date doesn't know the fact that I nearly missed my plane. So we will just shove that away. Secondly, that was one of the most amazing places where I have been in my life. And I visited about 30 countries in my life. And also one of the most unique locations I ever played chess in. Hear this out. The open tournament was played in a winery. Now, that in itself is quite irregular when you are playing a tournament in a winery, even by New Zealand standards. But when you are playing an open tournament in a winery where the actual tournament hall is a wine cellar, now that is next level. I kid you not, the tables were set up right alongside barrels of wines on both walls, running along all the way. It was amazing. I have never seen anything like that. It had a really awesome atmosphere. And as soon as you walked up the stairs, on the other side of the hill, it was the beach. Breathtaking views. Absolutely amazing. So kudos to the Kiwi. Oh, by the way, and on top of that, I was lucky enough to actually stay at the absolute Kiwi legend, Murray Chandler's place.
Oh, wow.
I actually stayed with Murray and we did some analysis together and we talked about chess. And the guy is an absolute local hero in New Zealand, although he did spend a fair bit of his career, I think, as a British citizen. So there was a bit of a cross there. I think he's a dual citizen, but he's certainly looked upon as a Kiwi, and rightly so. It was an amazing experience overall. As for the culture of chess in Australia, Australia is a very unique place in regards to chess, in not necessarily a good way, because Australia is one of the very, very few countries on this beautiful planet where chess is not recognized as a sport. Now that we could live with technically, because we could say, who cares? We still run our tournaments. We do everything the way we do. The big downside to that is that as a result of that, it doesn't get government funding. And that's where it really stinks. Because in a wealthy first world country like Australia, if you are counted as a sport and you get government funds, that opens up insane opportunities as opposed to when you don't. And so as a result of that, chess has got a very, very negative reputation overall in the public in Australia. It's looked upon as equivalent to snakes and ladders, essentially. Mm-hmm. So it's just a silly game that people play in the pub when they are too drunk to do something sensible, like playing darts or billiards. That's basically the reputation on one end. On the other end, however, which is more of the top end of society, it's a bit of a prestige, if you will, that your child plays the piano, plays the violin, attends some sort of lecturing in whatever subject they excel at, and do chess, because it's looked upon as an intellectual pastime that is like a top class thing to do. And so the wealthier families of the big cities tend to make their children do this chess activity, which often ends up being private students going to competitions and the like. And I'm trying to conceal here a half sentence and not try to sound racist, but the sentence is only sound if I add to it that this is more typical with Asian families with Asian background, where education is everything. But it's also important that you do extracurricular activities. And on the top of the list for the vast majority of these families is music and chess.
Yeah, that's
and as a result of that, Australia has had a lot of outstanding talents coming through from Asian backgrounds who then achieved amazing heights by Australian standards and sometimes even world standards, but then didn't pursue their career because the pressure was on constantly from the get-go to achieve something remarkable, equally remarkable in the field of academia.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fairly common here too.
And so it's very easy to find amazing talents, but it's very difficult to find someone who would be willingly pursue the career of a professional chess player. In fact, up to date, we have got none. Other than the legendary Ian Rogers, we have had several grandmasters. Most of them are juniors too. And exclusively all of them stirred towards the academia. All of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you like life in Australia generally?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Canberra was an absolute jackpot for me to come to because I come from a very tiny town, which by most standards in the Western world would be considered as a village at best, with a population of hardly 5,000. And Canberra, despite of being the capital of Australia, is actually a big village. It's basically just suburbs after suburbs after suburbs of mini villages separated from one another, usually by national parks. More than 50% of Canberra is actually national parks. So it's a breathtakingly awesome, very widely open city with hardly any city life. I hate big city life. If I had started my Australian life in Sydney, which I absolutely love to bits. I love Sydney. I tell you how I love Sydney. I pack up my family on Friday. We go to Sydney. We spend the weekend there. We do awesome stuff. And Sunday night, we come home. That's how I love Sydney. But if I had to leave there on a daily basis and get through the grind of being stuck in traffic for hours on end, I would have gone absolute burko within a year. But because if I live in an environment that is very similar to where I originally come from, I found everything that I look after here. I really like it here. And I love the Australian people. I like the culture, save for the fact that chess is a little bit looked down on, but who cares? Chess is a language of, the world. So I am not restricted by any means to Australian students. In fact, the vast majority of my students now are international. But aside from that, I could even find in Australia plenty enough. So there is nothing not to love here in Australia apart from one thing, and that is that I am geographically as far away from my family as I could be, and that hurts.
Yeah, that's got to be tough.
That is the part that hurts.
Yeah. But you have your own family in Australia?
I do, yes. Well? So, yes, I got married in the meantime whilst I was here in Australia, and I have got my own child who some of the people who watch my streams and occasionally some of the YouTube videos are disturbed by her presence. So, yes, I do have my own family. How
old is your daughter?
My daughter is 8. My daughter is 8, yes. She's
this podcast. Sometimes my kids are chirping in the background, but because of the time difference, I'm recording past their bedtime. So,
smart move. I told her that today, honey, I'm recording something very important. No entry. If you need mommy, she's out there, and she's very cool. So it's
like she's a good listener. Cool. All right, Andras, one more question. I think this might be the longest podcast, yes, but it's been amazing. So I'm grateful for that. And this one is also sort of biographical related, which I think we've already sort of hinted at the answer, but. This one is from Jeff Anderson. Thanks, as always, for the support, Jeff. He says, I am Toth. Why did you stop playing OTB chess 10 years ago? You're not alone in that, of course, as I can think of other talented players who made the same decision. But what were your reasons for ending play? And do you play at all online?
I'm so glad that this question came up, because there was something that I left a little bit open earlier on that now I can close off. I said to you earlier on that I ended up pursuing my academic studies instead of becoming a professional player. And then I added to it that I have no regrets in that regard. So I will pick it up from there. When I came over to Australia, I still competed for a couple of years. So I did coaching and playing parallel side by side. But because of I had my job, then my family, then the coaching, I noticed that there was literally hardly any time to maintain my chess, to spend on, becoming better, going through my openings, just at least to retain what I used to be. And I thought, if I can't do it properly, I better not do it at all. But equally importantly, actually, no, far more importantly, by this stage, I got to the point where I began to enjoy my students' successes far more than my own. And that period of time actually coincided with the most successful period of my chess coaching in my life, which is when two of my students in 2 back-to-back years won the Australian Juniors, and shortly after, one of them became an international master. So I then realized that if I gain far more joy from the successes of my students and consequently coaching them, and I gain far less joy from playing, which I can't do as well as I would like to anyway, then why would I do something that I don't really enjoy as much as I used to? And why wouldn't I focus on something that I thoroughly enjoy and makes me really, really happy to carry on with? And so, although it was never a spoken or a completed and thought out decision, it's just sort of life stirred me that way. And one day I went like, wow, I haven't competed for a year and a half. And I'm not really missing it, because I have got 12 students who are all playing next week in this tournament where I used to play. And I can't wait to see how they go. And so it was just a natural transition to, I think, and I might sound a little bit corny, but to find my calling where I really think that this is what I want to do. And so I never really thought about not playing anymore. And as you guys probably know from my YouTube channel, Twitch, whatever, I do play online, and I do enjoy playing chess in more of a banter-like fashion, where I just, I play for fun. I try to retain a reasonably okay rating for my liking, so I have got that illusion that I can still play chess really well. But it's just for the fun, really. The main avenue for me now is exclusively coaching, and I really enjoy doing that.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, it's so hard to keep it going especially when kids enter the picture. All right, well, Andras, this has been amazing. We hit all the questions. If you guys want more of Andras, go to his YouTube channel, buy his Chessable courses. It's excellent stuff, and we really just scratched the surface of everything that Andras has to share. So Andras, we got YouTube, Chessable. Are you doing Twitch? That's one avenue I didn't investigate.
Look, it's a very funny period now, and I will try to cut it short. I'm on currently school holidays, so I've got more time to stream. I am going to set up a regular streaming regime, and if it catches on, then I intend to extend it into the future into regular. If it doesn't, I will see.
Okay, sounds good. But we'll put all the links for where people can track you down.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Andras. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you, Ben. I really, I'm grateful for allowing me the opportunity to be on this fabulous podcast. Once again, it was an absolute honor. And look forward to be back probably again once later down the track. Thanks again for the invitation. Cheers.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye, Andras.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, as always, to my producer, Matthew Passy, and to everyone who helps spread the word about the show, telling your friends, writing positive reviews on podcast platforms. All of that stuff helps. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at BennyFishel1. Join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can find the link on the website, and we are back in action on Instagram at Perpetual Chess, sharing a weekly clip from the podcast. So follow us over there as well. But of course, the main purpose of these credits is to thank everyone who makes the show possible. by their financial support. Without you all, Perpetual Chess would have ceased to exist a long time ago, and for that I am forever grateful and work to continually improve and expand the offerings from Perpetual Chess. So without further ado, I would like to give extra special thanks to the following people and entities: Chessable.com, David Lazarus of LazmanChess.com, Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, the Abysmal Deaths of Chess blog, Adapta Interactive Web Designs and Services, the Apprentice Twitch channel, Andrew Alharji, Andrew Bach, Aniti Deer, Austin Clough, Benjamin Porteau, Bill Sigler, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, the Charlotte Chess Center, the Chess Central's Chess blog, Chessmood.com, Chris Flanagan, Chris Lott, Dan O'Hanlon, Daniel He, Danny Davidson, David Schreiber, Derek Jones. I am Dimitri Schneider. I am Eric Rosen, Eric Tam, Ewan Richardson, Farhan Thawar, Faraz Sawaf, Gary Foreman, Glenn Downing, Greg Harfst, Greg Shahadi, Gregory Gulick, Guven Manet, James Kennedy, Jeff Martinson, Jens Green, Jeremy Nielsen, John Jernigan, John Rockefeller, John Cromarty, John MacArthur, Kelly Palmer, Kevin O'Callahan, King Selt, Lucio Casada Silva, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Matthew Feeney, Michael Cann, FM Michael Oblin, Mike Zelazny, Mr. Mike Shahadi, the famous Mr. Dodgy, the Nerdnaze Twitch channel, Peter Sodi, the Playmore Chess Academy of the Hampton Chess Club, Reuven Fisher, the Seattle Chess Club, Shane Unger, Stephen Kelty, Stephen Martinez, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Todd Bryan of StrongChess.com, Todd Kennedy, the Vintage Patzers, which is a Chess.com improver group, Wayne Beam, William Hogarth, Aaron Waffler, Ace Viega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Payhouse, FM Andrey Terakov, Dr. Andrew Perry, Barry Hessian, Bill Juniper, Bill Moran, Brad and Andy Rosen, Brett Howard Lynn, Brian Mullis, Bruce Scott, Brian Tillis of Palm Beach Chess, Chad Hilton, Dr. Charles Snodgrass, Chris Wayne Scott, Christopher Baumgartner, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood, I am Christoph Zalecki, aka Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Corey Budson, Costa Chorus, Courtney Fry, Craig Mallon, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Naylor, Dave Saylor, David Bleskacek, David Brown, David Hamlin, David Cramley, Dalen Shelton, Dennis Parrish, Dirk Decker, FM Donnie Ariel, Douglas Matthew, Dwayne Edmonds, Ed Daly, Emmanuel Langlois Robitaille, Ethan Smith, Hallelujah Cat, Ian Mason, Indrick Ryland, Felipe Melo Pereira, Fox Valley Chess Club, Francis Latarte Lavoie, Dr. Frank Torres, Frank Zananis, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vanderveld, Gene Stewart, Gerard Barta, Giovanni Russo, Hans Schut, Harish Srinivasan, Howard Vihan, Jacob Kovac, Jacob Turan, Jacques Perry, James Aspinwall, James Banastia, James Muir, Jason Willem, J.G. Chakrabarty, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, Yep Hoyland, Jerry Wells, Jim Ratliff, John Tully, Juan Almaguer, Dr. John Fallon, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, John Jeffrey, John McMurtry, Jonathan Slater, John Tully, Jose Rodriguez, Justin Gardner, WGM Jen Shahadi, Joel Rocky, John Thompson, Grandmaster Josh Friedel, I am Kare Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, Kevin Boyce, Kevin Pryor, Kiora Gata of the Lakeshore Chess Club, I am Kostya Kavutsky, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Kyle McAvoy, Larry Ryforth, Laura Belyovsky, Macaulay Peterson, Mark Miller, Martin Knudsen, Martin Krug, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco, Matthias Plock, the Mechanics Institute Chess Club of San Francisco, Michael Allard, Michael Hudson, Miguel Aristide, Mike Clem, Mitchell Fabian, Nate Salon, Neal Bruce, Nigmat Mulajanov, Nicholas Isabel, Olaf Mueller-Michaels, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Passy Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Sweeney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Randy Tempo, Ricky Grijalva, Richard Hallenbuck, Robert Tichy, Robert Turner, Rory Coleman, Roy Yearwood, Ryan Berg, the Say Chess YouTube channel, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Sebastian Finsterwater, Walder, Shane Unger, the Silver Knights in Richmond, Stefan Roller, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tom Edsel, Tomas Komanich, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Vishnu Srikumar, William H. Brock, William Juniper, William Peterson, FM Zhao Cheng of Chess1000.com, and of course, Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back next week with another episode of Perpetual Chess.